Most of us spend our lives chasing recognition, wealth, and achievements. But here's the problem. What happens when you get everything and still feel empty? What happens when success doesn't fill the void and failure crushes you beyond repair? That's the darkest lesson Steve Jobs learned. And today, we'll uncover how putting God first became the missing piece in the puzzle of life. When you stand on a stage and people applaud, when they look at you as if you are some kind of genius, it's very easy to believe the lie that you are the source of everything. When the first Macintosh was launched, people saw a revolution, but what I saw was something humbling. Because the truth is, human beings don't create from nothing. We only discover what has always been there. I didn't invent the beauty of simplicity. I didn't invent the elegance of design. I only uncovered it. Like an explorer finds a hidden island. The island was there long before the explorer arrived. That is what it means to create. It means to search, to stumble upon patterns, and to bring them into form. And when you recognize that truth, you realize something deeper. There is a higher architect, a mind far greater than yours that designed this universe with laws, patterns, an endless inspiration waiting to be uncovered. You see, arrogance tells you that you are the creator. Humility teaches you that you are a vessel. And being a vessel is more powerful than being a god in your own mind. Because when you accept that there is something above you, you begin to see the world with clearer eyes. You begin to realize that creativity flows through you, not from you. That every spark of genius is not yours to own, but yours to channel. When I worked on the iPhone, the world called it magic. But I never believed in magic. I believed in alignment. When you align yourself with truth, when you align yourself with timeless principles, the result looks like magic to others. But to you, it is simply humility in action. To stand before the universe and say, I am not the creator, but I am willing to be used for creation. Think about it. The greatest breakthroughs in history didn't come from men and women who thought they were gods. They came from people who humbled themselves enough to listen to the patterns of nature, to listen to the silence of the mind, to listen to the whispers of something divine guiding them. Einstein once said, he only wanted to know the thoughts of God. The rest were details. That is not a weakness. That is wisdom. The reason humility is so powerful is that arrogance blinds you. When you think you are the master of everything, you stop learning. You stop listening. You stop being curious. But humility keeps you a student, no matter how successful you become. And that student mindset is where true innovation is born. When you believe you don't have all the answers, you go searching for them. And in that search, you open doors others never even knew existed. I learned this the hard way. In my early days, I let ego run wild. I wanted to prove I was different, that I was special, that I could control everything. And for a moment, it worked. I was young, successful, and powerful. But the higher you climb on the ladder of ego, the easier it is to fall. And when I fell, when I was rejected, when I lost everything, it was humility that rebuilt me. It was the realization that I was not the ultimate source of creation, that my role was never to be a god, but to serve God through the work I brought into the world. Humility before creation doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself correctly. It means understanding that you are gifted with talents, but those talents were placed in you by something greater. It means realizing that your ideas are seeds, but the soil, the rain, and the sunlight are not in your control. You can plant, you can nurture, but growth comes from above. And when you see it that way, you stop obsessing about ownership and you start focusing on stewardship. The artist doesn't own beauty, he reveals it. The musician doesn't own harmony, she discovers it. The inventor doesn't own innovation, he uncovers it. In the same way, humility allows you to see your work not as your possession, but as your contribution. And the moment you make that shift, your work becomes less about ego and more about service. Less about being admired and more about serving a higher purpose. This is what I want you to understand. The reason putting God first matters is that it frees you from the weight of pretending to be God yourself. It allows you to live, to create, and to innovate without arrogance poisoning your vision. It allows you to see that every great idea, every moment of clarity, every flash of genius was never an accident and never yours alone. There is a moment in every life when the ground disappears beneath your feet. For me, that moment came when I was pushed out of Apple. Imagine building something from nothing, pouring your soul into it, watching it grow, watching the world finally recognize it, only to be told you no longer belong there. I was 30 years old, and everything I thought I was, every piece of identity I carried, was tied to Apple. And in one brutal moment, it was gone. I walked out of that building not as a visionary, not as a genius, not as a leader. I walked out as a man who had lost everything. That kind of loss does not just take your career. It eats away at your confidence, your pride, your belief in yourself. You start asking dangerous questions. Who am I without my work? Do I matter if I no longer have a title? Will anyone remember me if my story ends here? That was the test. Not the test of success, but the test of loss. And let me tell you this, failure is louder than applause. It drowns out your achievements, it echoes in your mind. It makes you question everything you thought was certain. But here's the truth I discovered. In that darkness, loss is not the end. Loss is the beginning of clarity. When everything was stripped away, when I had no company, no spotlight, no stage, I realized something. I realized that life had not abandoned me. God had not abandoned me. The universe had not abandoned me. Instead, I was being refined. I was being tested. I was being given the chance to see who I was when everything external was gone. And that is when you learn who you really are. Failure, in its purest form, is a mirror. It shows you the part of yourself you didn't want to face. It strips away the illusions, the arrogance, the masks. When Apple turned its back on me, I had a choice. I could drown in self-pity, or I could rise with humility. I chose to rise, not because I was strong, but because faith whispered that my story wasn't over. That's the power of faith in moments of failure. It reminds you that the world's rejection is not God's rejection. It reminds you that your worth is not tied to a paycheck, a company, or a reputation. It reminds you that the darkest nights are not punishments, they are invitations. Invitations to grow, to reinvent, to rebuild on a foundation that cannot be shaken. I had to learn to let go of the idea that I was in control. I had to learn that sometimes losing is the only way to discover what really matters. Because when I lost Apple, I gained something I didn't expect. I gained perspective. I gained resilience. I gained freedom from the illusion that success defined me. And in that freedom, I found the courage to create again. When I built Nexty, when I invested in Pixar, I wasn't chasing redemption. I was simply following the path that had been laid before me. And though at the time I couldn't see it, that path would eventually lead me back to Apple. But here's the key. You don't survive failure by knowing the future. You survive failure by trusting that your life is bigger than your circumstances. The test of loss and failure is not about whether you will stumble. You will. It's about what you do when you are on the ground. Do you let bitterness harden your heart? Do you let rejection define your identity? Or do you choose to see loss as a teacher? For me, failure became my most powerful mentor. It taught me lessons success never could. It taught me patience. It taught me humility. It taught me faith. And here's something most people don't want to hear: failure is inevitable. But it is also necessary. Because without failure, you never meet the version of yourself that is unshakable. Without loss, you never discover that there is a strength within you that does not depend on applause. And without pain, you never learn the beauty of faith. When you go through loss, you think it is the end of your story. But sometimes, it is simply the chapter that prepares you for the greatness to come. We live our lives believing we are in control. We plan, we strategize, we build empires, and we act as if the universe must obey our timelines. I used to think that way too. When Apple was growing, when products were selling, when headlines praised me as a visionary, it was easy to believe I held the strings. It was easy to think I was the one bending reality. But life has a way of shattering that illusion. When I was diagnosed with cancer, everything changed. In an instant, the illusion of control was stripped away. The truth is, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much influence you hold, no matter how many people chant your name, there are forces you cannot control. You cannot control time. You cannot control the length of your life. You cannot control the silent battles inside your own body. At first, that realization terrifies you. It makes you feel powerless. But with time, you begin to see that the illusion of control was the real prison all along. Because when you believe you control everything, you live with fear, fear of losing, fear of failing, fear of not being enough. The illusion convinces you that your worth depends on how tightly you can grip the steering wheel of life. But the truth is, the tighter you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. Control is a myth, but alignment is real. And when I say alignment, I mean aligning with God, aligning with the higher order that designed this universe. Think about it. You don't control when the sun rises. You don't control when the seasons change. You don't control the heartbeat inside your chest. Yet, every day, those things happen with perfect precision. What arrogance it is to believe we are the masters of everything when even our next breath is not promised. Illness was my greatest teacher in this, because when I looked at death in the eye, all the illusions collapsed. My wealth couldn't buy me more time. My power couldn't rewrite the diagnosis. My reputation couldn't guarantee tomorrow. And in that silence, I understood something I had ignored in the noise of success. Control is not the source of peace. Surrender is. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is wisdom. It is the recognition that you are a participant in this grand design, not the designer himself. It is the ability to work with intensity, to create with passion, but to also release the outcome to something greater than yourself. When you put God first, you stop carrying the unbearable weight of trying to be God. And in that release, you find freedom. Many people chase success as if achieving their goals will finally make them feel safe. But safety built on control is fragile. Lose a job, lose a company, lose your health, and that safety vanishes. But when your foundation is not control but faith, then no storm can truly destroy you. Because your identity, your worth, and your peace are no longer tied to circumstances you cannot command. I used to believe that I could design not just products, but my entire destiny. And in a way, I did. Until the day I couldn't. Until the day life reminded me that I was mortal. And strangely, that realization didn't weaken me. It made me stronger. Because when you stop pretending you're in control of everything, you finally begin to live with honesty. You begin to live with gratitude for the time you are given. You begin to value the present moment as the only moment you ever truly have. The illusion of control is dangerous because it keeps you chasing an impossible goal. It keeps you restless. It keeps you anxious. But when you break free from it, you experience a kind of peace that success alone can never deliver. You stop asking, how do I control everything? And you start asking, how do I align myself with the one who controls everything? And in that shift, your life changes. Your work changes. Your relationships change. Because you are no longer building from fear. You are building from faith. You are no longer clinging to the illusion that you are the master of the universe. You are finally free to play your role, to fulfill your calling, and to leave the rest in hands far greater than your own. When people hear the name Steve Jobs, they think of machines. They think of iPhones, iMacs, iPads, and the company called Apple. But here's what I want you to understand. Machines don't last forever. Technology evolves, devices become outdated, and what once looked revolutionary eventually becomes ordinary. The question is not whether the machines survive. The question is whether the meaning behind them does. For years, I thought my legacy would be the products I built. Sleek designs, powerful tools, ideas wrapped in glass and aluminum. But time has a way of humbling you. Because when you look closely, you realize that the real measure of a life is not what you built with your hands, but what you ignited in the hearts of others. Legacy is not about machines. Legacy is about impact. You see, when you put God first, your perspective shifts. You stop asking, how do I make people admire me? And you start asking, how do I serve? Because admiration fades. Service doesn't. When I spoke on stages, I didn't want people to just remember the shiny device in my pocket. I wanted them to feel that spark inside themselves. The belief that they, too, could change the world, because a product without meaning is just metal and code. But a vision that awakens people, that can outlive you. The truth is, every human being leaves behind a legacy, whether they realize it or not. Some leave behind bitterness. Some leave behind wealth. Some leave behind inspiration. And the choice is yours. And the choice is shaped by what you put first in your life. If you put only yourself first, your legacy ends with you. If you put only money first, your legacy fades when the currency changes. But if you put God first, your legacy stretches beyond machines, beyond markets, beyond time itself. I remember holding the first iPhone before it was shown to the world. I thought to myself, this is not just a phone. This is a tool that can connect people, that can empower them, that can give them access to knowledge, creativity, and opportunity. But even then, I knew the device was temporary. The real value was not the phone. The real value was what it unlocked inside people. The ability to dream bigger, to reach further, to believe they could do more. That is legacy. And here's the paradox. The more you chase legacy for yourself, the less of it you leave behind. Legacy is not something you can grab. Legacy is something you give. You don't build it by carving your name into history. You build it by writing your impact into the lives of others. And when you put God first, your vision expands beyond your own life. You begin to ask not just, what can I create? But how can what I create serve something eternal? At the end of the day, no one will remember the exact specifications of an iPhone or the dimensions of a MacBook. What they will remember is how these tools changed the way they lived, the way they dreamed, the way they connected, and even that will fade in time. But the values, the faith, the courage, the determination that fueled those creations, that is what remains. Because machines rust, but meaning lasts. Think about the people you admire most. It is rarely their possessions that inspire you. It is their values, their sacrifices, their unshakable faith in something bigger than themselves. That is what carries forward from generation to generation. And that is why legacy beyond machines requires humility, vision, and alignment with God. Because only then can your work transcend its physical form and carry eternal weight. I spent much of my life obsessed with design, with innovation, with perfection. But as I looked closer at the end of my journey, I understood that even the most beautiful device eventually becomes outdated. What does not become outdated is the light you pass on. the inspiration you give to someone else, the courage to dream, the faith to endure, the humility to serve. That is the true operating system of legacy. And so, the question you must ask yourself is simple. What are you leaving behind? Not in your bank account, not on your resume, not in the headlines. What are you leaving behind in the souls of others? Because when you put God first, you stop obsessing over the legacy of your name, and you start building the legacy of your impact. When I look back at my journey, from the garage where Apple was born to the stages where the world listened, one truth has grown louder than all the applause: put God first. Because without that, success becomes hollow, failure becomes unbearable, control becomes an illusion, and legacy becomes temporary. Humility before creation taught me that I was never the ultimate source, only a vessel. The test of loss and failure reminded me that titles and companies can vanish, but faith can carry you when nothing else does. The illusion of control revealed that no matter how powerful you seem, you are still fragile, still mortal, still dependent on a strength greater than your own. And legacy beyond machines showed me that what lasts is not the product in someone's hand, but the light you awaken in someone's heart. So don't just chase achievement. Don't just worship success. Don't just live as if you are the master of your fate. Live with humility, endure with faith, build with service, and align yourself with God. Because when everything else fades, and it will, that alignment is the only thing that remains.